Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and today I want to tell you about an upcoming change to Titans. This is a rules errata that is being rolled into the reprint of the bigger geekier box, timed with the release of the Goblins, which will be on April 9th. This is the same reprint that is fixing the famous Dwarf King problem. You may have noticed less videos over the last few months, as well as a reason why I couldn't discuss why there was no March Smashness this year. Well, now I can finally say that my team and I, as well as a few key contributors, were part of a small, special project commissioned by AEG to evaluate the impact of Titans. It took place over the course of more than a year and many, many games, and though I really shouldn't invert the pyramid here, it's important for me to establish the context for why we did what we did before clarifying what's actually coming. Even though I give him a hard time often, I do have to give credit where credit is due and point out that it was Vespert who brought up that we are at a mathematical impasse with Titans. If Titans provide an advantage, failure to include more will only exacerbate that advantage as they become harder to counter. But if we introduce more Titans and they do have an advantage, then it becomes difficult not to choose a Titan faction to have a clash. And this is a rare moment where we agree. So we had to find another way, but first we needed to see if there was a problem. I have long thought that Titans, particularly Titans with power, provided an unfair advantage because of their relative counter-free nature, and we were given a chance to prove it in a controlled setting. But one thing we knew going in was that there was a rules gap that needed to be addressed: Titans causing infinite loops. If you recall from a previous video, I talked about how a strategic clash with Great Wolf Spirit and Truckers could create infinite power by repeatedly using the Great Wolf Spirit talent twice, clashing via Titan movement and replaying the Titan. Well, it turns out there's a simpler form, and it comes from everyone's favorite impactful Titan, Mergicon. Mergicon can be played at the start of your turn, but if you clash, he goes back to Titan Limbo. But it is still the start of your turn, and cards retain no memory of their status, so he can be played again, and again, and again. While this accomplishes nothing, my Great Wolf Spirit combo creates infinite power, and it needed to be plugged anyway. So you'll see that the first change was to create a rule that you could only play a Titan once per turn. This approach is simple and clean, and fixes the infinite loops. The only Titans that this hurts is Rainbow Rock and Kraken, who can come into play after a base scores with the Titan, but you'll see why we kept it this way when you see the project results. So how did we test my theory? We created 128 matches of games featuring one and only one Titan. Given when the project started, we limited ourselves to the same 64 factions as March Smashness, because there would be too many variables otherwise, and Marvel was not yet finalized. All factions participated in randomly generated matches, where each faction appeared in an equal number of games. Each game was played 3 times total by 3 sets of players to collect as much data as possible. Rather than take the aggregate result, we took the individual results for the average, again for data density. And we did this twice, playing the same matches before we implemented any changes, and then again after the changes we did. And given that I mentioned that there were changes, you can deduce that clearly something was wrong. We limited ourselves to games of 2 and 3 players due to the volatility of 4 players and categorized everything accordingly, and the early results were not good. Simply having a Titan created a 59% chance of victory in 2-player. If the Titan supplied power, whether as a constant or power counters, that number increased to 64%. Finally, we asked players to flag the game if they scored at least one base where the Titan was the only power for a player on a base, and that number jumped to 78%. In other words, if you managed to get an easy second place with no cards, that efficiency, as well as the ability of the Titan, had a dominant effect in 2-player. In 3-player, the numbers tell a slightly different story. While the overall chance of winning by simply having a Titan increased to 62%, the gap between Titans was actually less at 60. This makes a little bit of sense, as a Titan with power actually increases the efficiency of other players, as now there are twice as many players to take advantage of it. You are also being pushed to a less valuable 3rd place, which explains why the points for the free advantage is also at 62%. While these numbers are not as bad as 2-player, they are still in fact bad. And for those curious, if you are statistically minded and have programming skills, I'm happy to share the raw JSON with you so that you can run your own metrics and draw your own conclusions. We ended up recording a few more data points, but at some point, you can drive yourself crazy with data mining. So what do we do about this? Well, there were 4 major ideas brought up, the first of which never saw the light of day. Given that many event kit Titans are brought into play by sacrificing regular plays, perhaps Titans could be removed in the same way. And if not taken out immediately, perhaps you could form a clash with a virtual Titan. But this doesn't work in reality, because if Titans supply power, you aren't winning that clash most likely, and for Titans that can enter for free, instead of playing faster, you are playing slower. So we never truly considered that. Another idea was to make Titans require a minion for the purpose of presence, which solves the 78% problem, but also directly conflicts with the Kaiju action rule. It also doesn't do anything to stop engine titans from doing anything, because some don't supply power natively, but still produce problems. And I'm looking at you, Great Wolf Spirit. One idea that had more promise was the idea that titans can go the monster route and be minions. But this actually made the problem worse, because now every titan, regardless of power, could give you power creep-free presence. While this could have allowed cards to interact with them and produce some interesting effects, it would have also caused quite a few headaches with known problematic cards. Still, the idea of using existing cards for interactions had promise, especially because removing titans is designed to provide much of the same effect as removing minions, particularly when VP was involved. So we came up with a midpoint. For the purpose of destruction only, those cards could target titans. In other words, when you play a destruction card, treat each titan as a power 0 minion boosted by any power modifications it has, like power counters. If a card could kill a minion of that power, it could kill a titan of the same power. Why destruction only? It has to do with many of the other rules of titans. Destruction is by far the most prevalent effect in the game. In terms of shuffling, there are very few cards in the game that do that. Returning to hand via Into the Time Slip currently works now, so that rule wouldn't change anything for it. But if we did allow place and return to affect titans, who benefits from that? The only faction that really benefits a lot is aliens, who have both, and we weren't buffing aliens further, especially not in 2-player. So rather than picking and choosing effects, it was cleaner just to apply the rule to destruction, and it allows many more factions to interact with titans. So looking at the list of titans, who is affected most by this change? It would take too long to go through all of them, so I'll cover the most impacted and the most not impacted. Maybe I'll save the rest for another video. For titans that have no cost to playing them, it doesn't do much. Dagon could pretty much be replayed next turn, and his power is meaningless since he requires minions anyway. This does, however, hurt the Great Wolf Spirit, because it's hard to keep maintaining the lead in both bases. The Cream Puff Man was heavily impacted, because he's usually a 2 on a rival turn. It's not automatic that he can come out immediately, and this is a good thing, as he is too strong anyway. The titan hurt the most is regretfully the Spirit of the Forest, because you lose 2 plays, and it can be undone with a single play, even a talent, but you can still get a few ores in before that happens. And we were told that errataing titans was not on the table. Timebox was also hurt because of the obvious wait time, but it allowed Timebox to be more bursty since he could just hang out in limbo till he was needed anyway. But who really got hurt, and needed to get hurt, was Gorgonzola and Rainbowrock. Both have their costs, and Rainbowrock, especially being a mobile 1 power, was problematic. For the Kaiju, this is important because they already have the advantage of camping with actions for easy presence. Having a Titan 2 was overkill, especially a mobile one. Finally, the last one that came to mind was the Wizard Titan, who is difficult to kill given that he is often high power. But being able to take out someone who is both an engine and supplies power proved to be significant if you could pull it off. With the new rule in place, how did that change the matches that were replayed? Significantly. Now I must admit, there's a little bit of purpose bias here, as players are specifically going after Titans when they can. And we also had flags in place for factions that simply couldn't change anything. But still, in 2-player, the Titan win rate dropped by 3% to 56%. The Titan with power factor dropped to 60%. But the Titan for VP score dropped 13% to 65, which is significant. I believe this is because you are hurting the Titans where they are most impactful. A Titan may still be out there for the game, delivering long-term value, and the Titan is only killed when closer to scoring, to prevent losing a battle of attrition, since Titans are renewable. But what's more telling is that the 65% is achieved through significantly less opportunity, meaning that the 78% was not only dominant, but incredibly frequent. Do Titans still provide an advantage? Yes, and though this is not perfect, it is progress. And I know that sometimes progress is what you need, until metas form and you think of something else. We already devoted a ton of time into this, and with this fairly straightforward rule added, the gap was closed by a good amount. More than anything, for everyone who says that Titans are not an advantage, now we can say otherwise. I learned a ton leading this initiative, and it really makes you think about the nature of interaction and messing with the game's core principles. But Titans are here to stay, so we need to figure out how to bring them back in line with everything else. From a fun perspective, I would say that this rule was honestly more fun. It felt like the Titan player still had something special, but I could do something about it, and that seemed fair. I look forward to hearing your feedback on the new rules as you try it. As I said before, the rule will be reflected in reprints of the box rulebook, but you don't have to buy it to apply the new rule. What do you think of the Titan study and the new rule? Let me know in the comments. Oh, And April Fools, minions! Since there are people who still think that the geek thing from last year is real, let me clarify that this video is 100% fake. No study, no rules, no compliment to Vespert, and yep, that's a real infinite loop that needs to be addressed. Now please, do me a favor, do not spoil this in the comments. If I haven't edited out this sentence, I am currently in the hospital and my wife is giving birth, so I will not be around to police comments, so please do not ruin this for others. Happy April Fool's Day, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow for the Masters of Evil. Let's shut it down.